Point number 1. It's interesting the date has been formatted as BBY4 when typically the number comes before either BBY or ABY. BBY of course standing for before the Battle of Yavin and ABY standing for after the Battle of Yavin. Point number 2. Ooh, a TIE Avenger. This ship first appeared in the 1994 video game Star Wars TIE Fighter, and if Wikipedia is to be believed, has never appeared nor has been mentioned in any major Star Wars media. So it's neat to see it finally get its big screen debut. Point number 3. Now you might think that this planet is called Sinar and these buildings comprise Test Facility 73, but not so. This databank entry on StarWars.com instead reveals the planet itself is called 73, as it is the 73rd world owned by Sinar Fleet Systems. Point number 4. In case you forgot, Kafrene is the location we actually first see Cassian in the movie Rogue One. The Ring of Kafrene, also just known as Kafrene, in the Kafrene asteroid belt in the Kafrene system.
We are an unimaginative lot when it comes to naming things.
Point number 5.
Oops.
Oops. What does that mean? What do you mean?
No, I got it. Some jerk didn't put.
I know what I
got it, though.
Point number 6. First a TIE Avenger and now a Range Trooper? Is this show going to keep bringing back things from Star Wars past that made very few appearances? Because if yes, I can get behind that. The Range Trooper, of course, making its debut in the Solo movie and not appearing much in other media after that. Point number 7. How goddamn durable is this TIE that it can be tossed around a hangar, shot at a bunch, and then smashed through the hangar doors? And it's still perfectly functional. No wonder Luthen wants to steal this thing, it puts regular TIE fighters to shame. Point number 8. So we've included the TIE Avenger and the Range Trooper. Do you want us to stop incorporating things from Star Wars history that didn't make that many appearances? Or do you want us to keep going and adding more? And so we get to see a couple of TIE Advanced V1s fresh from Star Wars Rebels. Though they were an Inquisitor's ship of choice in that show, I doubt it's Inquisitors that are chasing Cassian here. Point number 9. Chandrila as well, rarely seen but often mentioned in Star Wars Legends, especially throughout the New Jedi Order book series, goddamn. And in canon, it made its first appearance in the novel Aftermath and was a major location in the Battle of Jakku comic series. So I do believe, just like with the TIE Avenger, this episode marks the first on-screen non-hologram appearance of Chandrila. Point number 10. Okay, this is just getting ridiculous now. For those unaware, this is Erskine Samaj, a character from Rebels who only appeared in 4 episodes. Point number 11. If this was actually shot as one long take, that's awesome to see. I kept trying though to see if there were any cuts and where they could be, and the only times I could think of are when the camera moves to the side of Mon Mothma and all you can see is her and the wall. One shot could have ended and the next could have begun with her walking past the wall. And with some digital wizardry, the 2 shots could have been spliced together. But of course I could be completely wrong and it could just be one long take. Point number 12. I'll talk about this now. This little band of rebels constantly arguing with each other like children, being distrustful of each other, and eventually breaking into smaller groups who end up fighting each other is just a microcosm of how the various rebel cells throughout the galaxy are also all arguing with each other, being distrustful of each other, and even fighting each other. Point number 13. Love that we get to see Krennic again. Such a great character. And because this whole meeting is obviously not actually about for everyone, but instead secretly about how to get the Death Star up and running, he's making sure everyone understands just how monumentally important this all is, because we all know from Rogue One just how obsessed Krennic is with the Death Star. Point number 14. Oh great, first Porkins, I mean, since, you know, A New Hope came out first, even though it takes place in the future.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
And now Porco. If you're a pilot with pork in your name, you just need to stop being a pilot, seriously. Point number 15. My god, Krennic's body language here as he's talking, he's so sassy, I love it. Point number 16. Ministry of Enlightenment, my ass. More like Ministry of Propaganda, or Ministry of Lies! Deception! Yes, thank you, sir. I mean, just look at these suit-wearing assholes. Con artists if ever I saw one. Or 2. Point number 17.
You'll hear him tonight.
Why does this guy say this so smugly to Cassian? He ain't gonna be the only one hearing the terrifying beast tonight, mate. A lot of you are. Moron. Point number 18. Oh, come on, Leda. Maybe he's just got to think about personal space and physical contact. I had a girlfriend like that once. No hand holding, no arm over shoulder or around waist. You just might have to get used to waiting for them to always initiate contact going forward, like I had to. Or actually, could you imagine if Andor went there and had not just a lesbian couple with Vel and Cinta, but revealed Stekken was also gay? That would certainly anger a certain segment of Star Wars fans, I think. Anyway, let's move on to episode 2. Point number 19. I guess we're supposed to believe the rain and fog completely obscure whatever creatures came came along and ate the bodies. Like, the fog meant they couldn't see the presumably massive beasts, and the rain covered the noise of them munching and crunching away. Fine, yeah, sure, whatever. Point number 20. A tyrannical government unexpectedly going into locations to intentionally find people who are there illegally, or sometimes even legally, and imprisoning them or even deporting them whether they have a criminal record or not. Ignoring the fact that imprisoning these people will significantly affect the productivity of the industries that they were working in and will also negatively affect the economy since they are no longer able to contribute to it. Now, where have I heard all this before? Point number 21. Oh yeah, just fuck this dude to hell and back. And yes, hell is a thing in Star Wars. Have you ever seen The Empire Strikes Back?
Your tauntaun will freeze before you reach the first marker.
Then I'll see you in hell.
I mean, you can't even say this dude is just socially inept and isn't picking up on the not-so-subtle hints from Biggs that she isn't interested. You can't even say the tweet of, telling men I'm in a relationship even though I'm single because they'd rather respect an unknown man more than my choice to say no, applies to him. He's just a sexual predator through and through, and he's very aware of it. Point number 22. Hey, alright, Cyril and Dedra are a thing. Good for them, I guess. There's just nothing like surviving a deadly protest and bonding over shared trauma. Point number 23. I mean, it is good advice to always treasure the good times to make it through the bad times, but hearing that from Perrin, the guy who loves to live the good life but doesn't really want to work himself to maintain it, the guy whose idea of a bad time is being stuck listening to his wife worry about others,
Must everything be boring and sad?
when he'd rather be out having a good time gambling, his speech here just comes across as pretty hollow. Point number 24. Could have just told Cassian to sit back down instead of shoving him, arsehole. Point number 25. Just goes to show how childish these rebels are that they're playing rock, paper, scissors to sort things out. At least when Val and Earl and Earl and Grady do it in the first two Tremors movies, they do it in a lovable, goofy way. These guys doing it though is just pathetic. Point number 26. There's no rain this time, so I guess the ruckus the guys are making as they play their game is what prevented them from hearing Cassian fire the blaster. Fine, yeah, sure, whatever. Point number 27. I love this bee specifically ate the two man-children leaders of the groups, and that it's called a doodah. Point number 28. Not a fan of Cassian shooting this one guy on the TIE Avenger. I guess maybe it's supposed to be like how he shot Tivik in Rogue One, it's just something he had to do, but I would have preferred it if he just made it through this whole ordeal without killing anyone. That, throughout the whole thing, he was the voice of reason who kept his cool, and all the death was just the result of infighting between the rebels. Point number 29. Yep. This entire time Cassian and the rebels have been on Yavin 4, future temporary headquarters of the rebellion as seen in A New Hope. So I didn't have as much to say about episode 2 as I did episode 1, let's see how episode 3 goes. Point number 30. I always find it interesting seeing kids playing with toy versions of Star Wars things in the universe of Star Wars. Like how we see here one kid who has a toy Wookiee bowcaster and another kid with an AT-ST puppet. Reminds me of how Jyn Erso had a Stormtrooper toy as a kid in Rogue One. Point number 31. I knew the moment when Dedra said they can't keep putting off something that Cyril wanted to, back in episode 2, that it was Cyril introducing Dedra to his mum for the first time. Meeting Edie is like meeting Darth Vader, maybe even worse. Nice touch as well, showing Dedra trying on his smile and it not looking natural, like Catherine Weaver smiling in the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Point number 32. I love the look as well between Cyril and Dedra after her first encounter with Edie, like Dedra's thinking seriously and Cyril's thinking, I tried to warn you, and Dedra holding a hand out for a shake but not getting one. It's something that obviously we've seen a lot happen in other TV shows and movies, but it actually reminds me more so of Brienne bowing at Joffrey's wedding in Game of Thrones. A woman doing something that's not traditionally expected of them to do. I think if Dedra had gone in for a kiss on the cheek instead, Edie would have accepted that. Point number 33. Never mind the rebels stranded on Yavin 4 acting like children, Edie easily beats them in that regard. Not knowing when to keep her mouth shut, dripping sauce all over the place and mashing her food like a toddler. Point number 34. Best shot of the episode. I'm just like, same Cyril. Same. Point number 35. Second Rakata name drop for the show. In both Legends and canon, the Rakatans once ruled the galaxy with their infinite empire, as they were the first race to develop hyperspace technology, with it, at least in Legends, actually being powered using the dark side of the Force. Yet it was the dark side of the Force that led to the collapse of the infinite empire and the almost extinction of the Rakatan race. With this mention of them in the show confirming that just like in Legends, the Rakatans were out and about in the galaxy 25,000 years ago, this could mean they'll most likely make an an appearance in the upcoming Star Wars movie Dawn of the Jedi, which is set 25,000 years ago and will explore the origins of the Jedi Order and the Force. Point number 36. Don't get confused about this scene of Brasso accusing Kellen of betraying them and turning them into the Empire. Kellen didn't do that at all. Brasso is falsely accusing him of betrayal as a way to protect Kellen and his family, to make it not seem like Kellen was harboring them illegally, but instead just taking advantage of them before turning them in, like any loyal citizen of the Empire would. Point number 37. Anyone out there who complains about there being sexual assault in Star Wars, like how Star Wars Theory did, you all very clearly do not remember the likes of Jabba the Hutt keeping beautiful women as slaves, like Leia, forcing her to wear revealing clothing and licking on her in Return of the Jedi. It doesn't matter if you think she looks hot in that outfit, it's literally called the Slave Leia costume, and she was forced to wear it by Jabba the Hutt, who also sexually assaulted her by licking her. Then you have the race known as the Feline, who can secrete pheromones which make them irresistible to others, and the Feline Sizor tried to use his pheromones to seduce Leia against her will. Flipping the script, we also have the episodes Slaves of the Republic and Escape from Kadavo from Season 4 of the Clone Wars, where Anakin ends up the slave of Queen Sintel, who tries to seduce him to her side, constantly touching him, holding him, not letting him break physical contact, and controlling him by threatening Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. Sexual assault and creepy, grapey individuals have been a part of Star Wars for a long time, but I guess some people's glasses are so rose-tinted, it actually blinds them from seeing reality. Also, I saw this tweet that was made in reference to Star Wars theories, and I found it pretty funny, so I thought I'd share it with you all here. Point number 38. I've enjoyed it seeing Tay's descent over these 3 episodes, into threatening Mon Mothma over how badly supporting the rebellion has gone for him, how it's placing Mon Mothma between a rock and a hard place in not wanting anything to happen to Tay, but also not wanting him to go to Davo with what he knows. And plus, even if he gave her a number, there's no guarantee he won't come back later demanding more. But it seems Tay's story might be coming to an end since he now appears to be Cinta's new target. Mon Mothma won't be too happy about it, but like Cassian murdering Tivik, it's something that needs to be done. Point number 39. Poor Brasso dying off screen. A reminder of how sudden and pointless death can be. Quite the opposite of how we know Cassian goes out in Rogue One. Point number 40. This mix of Niamos is such a bop, and I love how it plays over the sad depressing shots of Vel missing Cinta, what might be the last time we see Tay alive, Brasso's dead body, and Wilman, Bix and Cassian mourning him, all juxtaposed with the banging tune of Mon Mothma raving out to it, as she tries to embrace this fleeting moment of joy amongst the constant barrage of stress and negativity, just like how her husband advised Leader and Stekken to during his speech in the last episode. But then suddenly the music is cut off as we go to the credits, as if to say to both Mon Mothma and the audience, that's it, that's all the joy you get, it's gone. For now. These first 3 episodes of Andor Season 2 were, in my opinion, really good. But I will say I'm glad they released 3 episodes at once, because if you compare the runtime of this video you're watching right now, where I reviewed and analysed about 2.5 hours of content, to when I reviewed and analysed episode 8 of Skeleton Crew, which was about a 30-minute long episode, to when I reviewed and analysed Beetlejuice, which was about a 1.5 hour long movie, yeah, it really goes to show just how little I could find to talk about. But I don't really mean that in a negative way. It's not that these episodes were boring or pointless. Beetlejuice wasn't boring, though a fair chunk of it was pointless with its filler characters and subplots. No, these 3 episodes were just a nice, slow burn. Cassian getting stuck on Yavin 4 and in space, Mon Mothma dealing with the wedding, Tay and Luthen, the gang on Mina Rao trying to figure out how to survive the audit. Their plots were told over the course of 3 episodes that felt more like one giant episode. Like how each entry in The Lord of the Rings is actually a volume containing 2 books, that when combined together make up the epic that is The Lord of the Rings. These 3 episodes are the first volume, and when all 4 volumes are combined, it will make up the epic that is Andor Season 2. To round all this off, my least favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to Cassian shooting the guy in the TIE Avenger as he's escaping from Yavin 4. I would have preferred it if there was no guy on the ship for him to shoot, or if Cassian did have to shoot someone, that he would have stunned them instead. And my most favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to the cutaway from Dedra and Edie to show Cyril laying on the bed. I just know that feeling so well. I see you, Cyril. I see you. Point number 1. Love the design of this location on Gorman, the sharp angles and how it's multi-tier, very cool looking. And just like the TIE Avenger and Chandrila in the last episode, this episode marks the first proper appearance of Gorman on the big screen in both Legends and canon. In Legends, it first appeared in the 1993 video game Star Wars X-Wing, which Star Wars TIE Fighter, which had the first appearance of the TIE Avenger, was the sequel of. Point number 2. This room has to have been intentionally made to look like the bridge of a Star Destroyer, with the raised central walkway and the computer stations lower down on each side. It just can't be a coincidence. Point number 3. Neat that we get to see the Ministry of Enlightenment's work that was mentioned back in episode 1 actually being shown to have an effect, even if it is ED buying into their propaganda. Just the irony of how she calls Cyril gullible, that's what's really breathtaking. But as we've seen in real life politics recently, an army of gullible idiots is still an army, and can be made to believe and do whoever's pulling their strings wants them to. Even those who don't fall for the propaganda still have to go along with it, giving their oaths of loyalty and capitulating just to keep their jobs, their businesses. Truly insane how Andor Season 2 was filmed from late 2022 to early 2024, yet so much of the show applies to the state of current politics, especially in the US. Point number 4. Actually, the reason so much of the show applies to the state of current politics is because the state of current politics, especially in the US, feels like a repeat of the state of politics that applied to Nazi Germany in World War II. If anyone watching disagrees with me on that, please leave now. So, World War II is what the writers of this show actually seem to be inspired by, since the Gorman rebels are very clearly based on the French resistance that operated in, you guessed it, France during World War II. The language Gorman speak sounds very similar to French, so much so I thought it was French at first, but reading what French speakers in various Star Wars Reddits have said on the matter, it apparently isn't actually French. And Gorman itself being a location famous for its fashion is just like how Paris, reading directly from Wikipedia, has been an international fashion capital, particularly in the domain of haute couture, clothing handmade to order for private clients. Point number 5. Speaking of World War II, it's funny that Richard Samuel, who plays Gorman/French rebel leader Cairo Rylance, played Sergeant Rachtman in Inglourious Bastards, who was the Nazi that got his head bashed in with a baseball bat. Point number 6. The mother is terrifying might be the best line of the episode. Point number 7. So Cassian's nervous about him and Bix being recognised and turned in even when all they're doing is shopping, but I think there's also another level of anxiety about this for Cassian because he knows even when you're just walking around doing nothing suspicious and no one recognises you, it can still lead to you being locked up, because that's exactly what happened to him back in Season 1 Episode 7 on the planet Niamos, which I completely forgot was called Niamos, or I would have mentioned it when the bop, also called Niamos, was played in the last episode. Point number 8. I like seeing something so mundane as a small grocery shop in Star Wars. Reminds me of when we saw Dexter's Diner back in Attack of the Clones. These very grounded everyday locations just give so much life to Star Wars. It helps me to much more easily immerse myself into the show. Point number 9. Goddamn, can Bix catch a break already? She was tortured by Dr. Gorst, almost got graped, and now she's got guilt over Cassian killing a guy because he saw her face, to the point she's medicating herself to stop Gorsk from torturing her in her nightmares with her guilt, like she's taking Hypnosil to stop from dreaming about Freddy Krueger or something. Point number 10. Cyril must have taken some hardcore acting classes over the past year to be able to go undercover and lie so convincingly. I mean, the change in Cyril from last season to this is just insane. Dedra most likely playing a big part in that change. Point number 11. Gorman front? You sure it's not the people's front of Gorman, Cyril? Point number 12. Seeing here and in episode 6 Mon Mothma's loss of faith in politics and the Senate and relying on both to get things fixed, especially when she says,
"If we do not stand together, we will be crushed,"
really sets up how she eventually commits fully with the rebellion and convinces the many rebel cells to join together into the alliance to restore the Republic, which we've already seen in Season 3 Episode 18 of Rebels, when she gave her declaration of the Rebel Alliance. Point number 13. This town meeting gives me Season 3 Episode 3 of The Crown vibes, that episode being about the Aberfan disaster and including a similar hostile town meeting. Point number 14. This isn't the first time we've seen Dakar ever, but it is the first time we've seen it in a long while. You'll most likely recognise it as being the rebel base seen in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, but I believe its last on-screen appearance before this episode was in Star Wars Resistance Season 2 Episode 2, and that episode was released all the way back in 2019. If I'm wrong about that being its last on-screen appearance though, please correct me in the comments. Point number 15. I can't be the only one who thought at first that Saw Gerrera had a Wampa working for him, but that's not a Wampa. It's a Gygoran called Moroth, and he actually appeared in Rogue One, which I didn't remember he was in until I looked him up. Point number 16. Another year and Saw's still got his legs. I wonder if we'll get to see him lose them in this show, or just out of nowhere he'll suddenly have the prosthetic legs that he has by the time of Rogue One. Point number 17. Speaking of losing a foot, last time I saw Pluty was in 1883. His name though back then was Joseph, and he'd had his leg cut off after being bit by a snake. All joking aside, Pluty is played by Mark Rissman, and Game of Thrones fans will also recognise him as Harry Strickland, the guy who led the useless Golden Company and disappointed Cersei by not bringing their elephants to King's Landing. When I saw him after Saw calls him over, I actually thought at first it was Gerdis, and somehow he was alive and well after he escaped from the inside of the doodah, Boba Fett style. Let's move on now to episode 5. Point number 18. Speaking of Game of Thrones, sort of, Attendant Grimish here, played by Kurt Agiwan, will most likely be recognised as having played Grand Maester Orwell by fans of House of the Dragon. Point number 19. This Gorman front woman must have been thinking, when Cyril stopped in front of her and turned in her direction, like he'd found out who she really was and was going to confront her. You can see her keeping her head down while everyone else is looking up at Cyril. She must have been bricking it. Point number 20. So let's talk about the Tarkin massacre and how it's related to the Gorman massacre from Legends. As this hotel worker tells Cassian, in 19 BBY, Tarkin landed his cruiser on Gormans that were peacefully protesting. The same thing happened in Legends, was instead called the Gorman Massacre, and is what led Gorman to start plotting to rebel against the Empire and eventually join the Alliance to restore the Republic 17 years later. Since the Gorman Massacre in Legends is called the Tarkin Massacre in canon, this means we've yet to see the canonical Gorman Massacre, and with it already being established to happen in 2 BBY, we'll most likely see it happen in the next 3 episodes of Andor. Point number 21. Do we think it was actually Partagaz who wanted Cyril followed? Or was it Dedra who did it to make sure nothing happened to Cyril? Point number 22. Getting it on with the lights off? Kinky. You can make out in the darkness as well that Dedra doesn't move. Cyril has to walk all the way over to her in the dark, making sure not to trip over his suitcase. Point number 23. It's interesting seeing Cassian schooling Enza on tradecraft and how to do it successfully. It highlights just how inexperienced the Gormans are in being rebels, and are way in over their heads in trying to go up against the Empire when it comes to espionage. Point number 24.
If I say this is the greatest day of my life, does it spoil everything?
I wonder if Dedra's thinking, oh, so saving me wasn't the best moment of your life? Or maybe she's thinking that was the best moment of her life. Point number 25. So, just like the Empire having too much information to handle from their overabundance of arrests, Luthen's also got too much information to handle from his overabundance of taps and informants. Point number 26. So, you can interpret this as Saw having fed Pluty a specific location to see if the Empire would set anything up at said location, revealing Pluty to be a traitor, or knowing just how paranoid Saw can be about everyone and everything, maybe Saw only suspected Pluty to be a traitor but decided to get rid of him now just to be safe, and also because Willman was readily available as the perfect replacement. Or Saw just decided he didn't want to run the risk of Pluty messing up and getting everyone killed, so he framed him as a traitor to save face in front of the rest of his followers, rather than admit he chose poorly in who Willman should teach the variations to. Point number 27. Pretty sick looking this camera on the X-Wing's wing shot as it goes into hyperspace. Point number 28. In case you didn't know, Onderon is the homeworld of Saw Gerrera, and it made its first canon appearance in the Clone Wars Season 5 Episode 2. That episode took place in 20 BBY, 17 years before this episode, and this is what Saw looked like back then. Crazy, right? Point number 29. If you're wondering, maybe Saw Gerrera wasn't huffing oxygen or medicine with that mask of his in Rogue One, but instead was huffing Rhydonium like he does at the end of this episode, then you are 100% correct. According to this Entertainment Weekly article, Tony Gilroy never actually had an idea of what Saw was huffing in Rogue One. So writer Beau Willimon came to him and said, hey, what if it's this? The this being Rhydonium. Essentially then, Luthen just gave Saw a machine that helped him get hooked on huffing petrol. Nice. Point number 30.
Revolution is not for the same.
Best line of the episode, and really speaks to how Luthen is going mad from trying to manage everything he has going on, and how Cassian doesn't think what the Gormans are trying to do makes any sense at all, committing a crime and then announcing it to everyone. Saw knows though, sometimes you have to do insane stuff to get the results you want, and along the way you might go a little bit insane yourself. That was episode 5, on to episode 6. Point number 31. So both Luthen and the Empire want Gorman to rebel, not for the good of the planet or the galaxy, but for their own twisted twisted reasons. The Empire wants Gorman to rebel so that they can have an excuse to take complete control over the planet, which is something they believe they'll be easily able to do because Gorman isn't a militaristic planet. Then they'll be able to mine for calcite, which will allow them to complete the Death Star, increasing the Empire's control significantly under the guise of making the galaxy safer and securer. Luthen, though, wants Gorman to rebel because despite Cassian telling him they're not ready to, Luthen knows that when the planet falls, it will aid the rebellion by being a rallying cry for others to rise up and oppose the Empire. Luthen is just Lord Farquaad.
Some of you may die, but it's a sacrifice I am willing to make.
I mean, yeah, he always has been, sending people out to do the dirty work for him, but sacrificing an entire planet, that's majorly crossing the line. Point number 32.
It's tough squeezing a whole year's worth of insincerity into 3 nights.
This has got to be a tongue-in-cheek reference to how there's a year gap between every 3 episodes this season, and the 3 episodes that need to have as much squeezed in to make up for not seeing the rest of the year. Point number 33.
Calibrate your enthusiasm.
That's this episode's best line, and good advice for everyone, I think. Point number 34. Oh, that's some great framing with Vel and Cinta in the yin-yang looking window. Reading from Wikipedia, yin and yang can be thought of as complementary and at the same time opposing forces that interact to form a dynamic system, in which the whole is greater than the assembled parts and the parts are important for cohesion of the whole, which describes Vel and Cinta pretty well, I think. However, though the window resembles the yin-yang symbol, that hard line across it that's separating the two could be foreshadowing that even though they're back together, they're going to end up separated again, this time permanently. Point number 35. Cinta's been in an accident. Did it perchance involve a crashing hover car that resulted in the death of its only passenger? Point number 36. Poor Cyril being lied to by the love of his life that he's just helping to keep the peace on Gorman, when in reality he's aiding the Empire in goading Gorman into rebellion, so that they can come down hard and take control of the entire planet. No eyebrows raised, no questions asked. Point number 37. The Gorman front should really count themselves lucky they're working with Luthen and not, say, Saw Gerrera. If Drina and Sam had spoken to Saw like they speak to Vel and Cinta, he would have no problem pulling a Pluty on them. Point number 38. If you've got an issue seeing 2 women kissing in a Star Wars TV show, yet don't have a problem seeing torture, murder, attempted rape, gore, etc, etc, stop watching right now and go and figure out how to become less of a bigot. Thank you. Point number 39. Oh shit, I didn't know the San Shayun were canon to the Star Wars universe. This galaxy far, far away must be where they escaped to after Halo 3. Joking aside, this is actually another instance, like the TIE Avenger, of the writers including something pretty obscure from Star Wars lore. In fact, this is so obscure it has only ever been mentioned once, in Star Wars Dawn of the Rebellion, the visual guide. And from that guide we learn this alien is filling the role of the Oathkeeper. Point number 40. Oh hey, it's Bail. Wait a minute, that's not Jimmy Smits. Nope, it's Benjamin Bratt playing Bail Organa here because Jimmy wasn't able to return due to working on another TV show. And if you're confused why they would recast Bail for such a small scene, instead of just cutting the character's appearance entirely, according to showrunner Tony Gilroy in this Entertainment Weekly article, I put him in episode 6 in an arbitrary way so people will get the conversation out of the way until the next week when he really starts to work. Gilroy continues, it's one of those situations where I want to do something simple. We don't do many things that are unnecessary, but it's like, let's get him in here now so people can discuss it for a week and get it out of their system, and then he can come back to really work. I didn't want the guy's work to be confused with his introduction. So expect to see more of Benjamin Bratt as Bail Organa in the coming episodes. I mean, he has to join Mon Mothma in rebelling against the Empire after all. Point number 41. Want to know more about this lost empire that Luthen mentions? Yeah, me too. I sprinted straight to Wikipedia to find out more, but apparently this is the first time it's ever been mentioned. It's not even a thing in Legends, which I find surprising. I wonder though if it could be referring to the Rakatans' infinite empire, an empire you could consider having been lost when the Rakatan race almost went extinct due to messing around with the dark side of the Force. Who knows? Point number 42. Mon Mothma and Krennic going head to head is just amazing to see. An absolute treat. And hearing some of the things Krennic says and how they apply today, like when he says,
Words do still have meaning.
It just makes me think of how those who are anti-trans say trans people are not the gender they identify as, because man and woman have specific definitions, which is just an idiotic argument, but I won't get into that here. All I'll say is, if you agree with what anti-trans people say, please just stop watching. Go away and learn how to become less of a bigot. Thank you. And then also when Krennic says,
My rebel is your terrorist. Something like that.
You just know which sides he would pick if he had to choose between Palestine and Israel, Russia and Ukraine, the USA and its own citizens. Just fuck you, Krennic. Point number 43. Am I insane, or does this piece of art behind Krennic look a heck of a lot like the half-finished Death Star 2 that we see in Return of the Jedi? Point number 44. At least Brasso's pointless death in episode 3 came at the hands of someone actually trying to kill him. Cinta's accidental death here though is just even more indicative of how unexpected and pointless death can be. Also, in my opinion, it was a 50-50 shot, no pun intended, on if it would be Cinta or Vel that would end up dying. On the one hand, we had the sudden reappearance of Cinta after she's recovered from her accident and has now decided she wants to have a proper relationship with Vel. But then, on the other hand, we also had the scene of Mon Mothma asking Luthen to get Vel to check in because she cares about her. So that stray blaster shot could have hit either of them, and I wouldn't have been surprised either way. Point number 45. What makes Cinta's death even more pointless is that it happened while Sam was fighting with Lazine, a guy who would have understood and been all for what was happening if Sam hadn't disobeyed orders, brought along a blaster and threatened Lazine with it. Point number 46. With how Krennic would look over at Lonnie and Claire and how her hand started bleeding, I really thought that when he made it over to where they were standing, he was going to see at least one drop of blood on the floor, and his suspicion that Lonnie and Claire were up to something was just going to increase significantly. Point number 47. I like how while Claire says the Tinian Codex came from a planet that considered sight a disability, Lonnie switches things up and instead describes it as coming from a planet that considered blindness a gift. Also, hearing Krennic talk about blindness just makes me think of this moment from Rogue One.
Are we blind? Deploy the garrison!
Point number 48. While Vel doesn't physically murder Sam, she does a hell of a job emotionally murdering him. The passion with how Vel describes Cinta and how she really hammers it home the guilt that Sam's gonna feel potentially forever. Oh man, this scene is just so good. Point number 49. If Krennic did die here, I wonder how much that would have actually changed the future. Point number 50. Hell fucking yes that we get to see Bix get her revenge on Ghost, giving him a taste of his own medicine. Now you might be thinking, oh, Luthen really followed through when Cassian told him he needs to help out in making Bix better. What a great guy, showing he does actually care about those working for him. But I think, in reality, Lonnie, after hearing from Partagaz that Ghost was going to transform from a one-man asset into an entire program, and that program would then aid in efficiently getting information out of the Empire's overabundance of prisoners, got that information to Luthen, who realised he could actually kill two birds with one stone. By sending Bix and Cassian to take out Ghost, it would hopefully give Bix some closure by getting revenge, and it would mess up the Empire's plans to make a whole bunch of new Ghosts. If there weren't actually any plans to expand Ghost into a program, I doubt Luthen would have bothered setting it up so that Bix and Cassian could get close enough to kill him. And of course, Ghost only vaguely remembers Bix. Some real M. Bison from the Street Fighter movie energy.
The day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
And speaking of Luthen, a lot of people got mad at him over the last 3 episodes. Cassian, Mon Mothma, Vel, Claire. I really wonder how much longer people are going to keep putting up with him. To round all this off, I cannot think of anything that I had any particular issue with in these 3 episodes. They were all amazing. So let's just skip to my most favourite part from all 3 episodes, the entirety of Saw Gerrera in episode 5. Forrest Whitaker is always a tour de force of Saw Gerrera, but especially in episode 5. And especially at the end with his speech to Wilman. He just absolutely knocks it right out of the park. Point number 1. Sweet, the rebellion has finally set up their base on Yavin. Weird that Cassian and Bix have their own house nearby though. Has everyone who has given up everything built their own place? Because wouldn't that mean a lot of homes being built? I always assumed the rebels on Yavin would just live in barracks or something. Point number 2. So Wilman didn't swap cells, ditching Luthen to join Saw. I guess he just inhaled a bunch of Rhydonium fumes, thanked Saw for helping him screw up his lungs, then just headed back to Luthen, who may or may not have forced Wilman to go to rehab. Point number 3.
Krennic's had the lab in Eadu working overtime all year.
Eadu is the planet Galen Erso was sent to by Krennic to work on getting the Death Star up and running, and where he died when the Rogue One crew were sent to deal with him. I've seen people speculate whether Galen had anything to do with the failure to find any Calcite substitute or alternative, that he lied to the Empire that it couldn't be done and had his fellow scientists join in on the lie. But I'm sure the scientists were told if they couldn't find a substitute or alternative, then Gorman would have to be catastrophically mined. So if they did lie, it was because they'd rather the Empire screw up an entire planet rather than help them in making the Death Star. Or they were somehow in the know, or at least hoped, just like Luthen, that the sacrifice of Gorman would aid the rebellion. Point number 4 really goes to show how desperate Dedra is that she has to resort to openly and unexpectedly kissing Cyril to get him to shut up and do as she says. I know I said it in my last video, but the transformation Cyril has gone through since season 1 is incredible. A guy under the thumb of his controlling mother with no self-confidence as a result, now turned secret agent who can talk so easily that he's tricked the Gorman rebels for over a year. Though saying that, he still allows those with authority, especially women, to control him. But as we see in these 3 episodes, he finally manages to break through that last barrier. Not in a good way, mind you, and too little too late. Point number 5. Oh hey, Theller's joined the Gorman front, and so has Lazine. If only Lazine had been a part of it sooner, he'd have made a much better guard than Sam. Point number 6. Am I insane, or does this conversation between Cassian and Bix about force healers sound like the same arguments that happen IRL between intelligent people and anti-vaxxers? If vaccines throughout history had all been proven to have never worked, then why would vaccines continue to be made and why would people continue to take them? And even if you were skeptical about vaccines, if you had the choice between dying from what you have or even just living with lifelong symptoms, or taking something that could very well save you and cure you, why wouldn't you try out the thing that could fix you? Even when Bix says Cassian keeps pretending like nothing's wrong but everyone knows it's not true, it's just like morons believing COVID wasn't real despite all the overwhelming facts and evidence. They're all pretending like nothing's wrong, but smart people know that's not true. COVID was real and vaccines helped. Point number 7. Cassian being a messenger could be referring to how everywhere he goes he's spreading the message of the rebellion, and it could also be referring to his future actions in Rogue One, getting the plans for the Death Star and transmitting them.
You think anybody's listening?
Point number 8. With how Bix has her arms across her stomach and the force healer puts her hand near Bix's stomach rather than say on her shoulder, this got a lot of people speculating that Bix might actually be pregnant and she just hasn't told Cassian yet. It as to why Bix leaves Cassian at the end of episode 9, because he'd want to leave the rebellion, not just for her but also for their child. And it'd be very similar to what happened between Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla in Rebels. After Kanan sacrificed himself in season 4 episode 10, it's revealed Hera was pregnant with his child, and it appears Kanan didn't know she was pregnant when he died, just like Cassian never knew Bix was pregnant when he dies in Rogue One. Point number 9. As well as people speculating Bix might be pregnant, people are also speculating that Cyril was having an affair with Enza. How he grabs her arm and how she slaps him suggests to people there's a level of familiarity between the two. That's more than just Cyril being helpful to the Gorman front. It suggests Cyril's also been helpful to Enza's front, if you get what I'm saying. Point number 10. Alistair Petrie returns as Davich Draven from Rogue One, which is neat to see. And I like how Cassian tells him,
"The day I need permission to come and go, I'm gone."
Which is exactly what happens in Rogue One. The Rogue One crew essentially have to escape from the Yavin base because they don't have permission to leave, and after they leave, Cassian and many others never come back. Point number 11. I guess Wilman shares Obi-Wan's opinion on flying.
Flying is for droids.
Point number 12. Did Cassian just look out that the same hotel worker who helped him last time had joined the Gorman front in the year between their bumping into each other? What if he hadn't and was scared of the Empire rather than angry at them? To the point he would actually inform on people to the Empire in the hopes they'll go easy on him if anything were to happen. Or had Wilman told Cassian that the guy working the desk was Gorman front and it was just a coincidence it was the same guy? Point number 13. Wilman's getting it on with Drina. Nobody tell Beela. But can someone go tell B2 that Cassian's okay, because goddamn that droid needs some closure. That was episode 7, now on to episode 8. Point number 14. Hearing the news reporter say pretty much the exact same thing that Partagas said to Dedra.
The inexplicable resistance to imperial norms.
The continued and inexplicable Gorman resistance to imperial norms.
Just a reminder that you shouldn't believe everything you hear on the news. Point number 15.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Cassian will remember that.
Rebellions are built on hope.
Interesting fact, this line wasn't originally in the episode, but was added when Tony Gilroy's son Sam Gilroy, aka Girdis from episodes 1 and 2, convinced his father to add it. As per this Entertainment Weekly article, my son is a big Star Wars fan and he often comes to the house and busts my balls at the computer about how little I know, Gilroy explains. One day he's there at the house and he's goofballing on me and he's like, well, who's going to introduce rebellions are built on hope? And I go, what do you mean? Gilroy continues. He goes, well, in Rogue One, Diego says it and Jin repeats it. And I go, well, isn't that from somewhere? He goes, no man, what are you talking about? You better figure that out. And so Tony Gilroy added it to the script. Point number 16. I wonder if Lazine realised or at least suspected what was going to happen and that's why he started to sing the Gorman anthem. So that if anyone out in the galaxy actually ever managed to see what the crowd was like before the massacre, they'll see it wasn't a hostile crowd shouting at the Empire, but just a crowd of proud Gorman people peacefully protesting, which of course would ruin the Empire's narrative that they were forced to take control of Gorman because the population had become violently anti-Empire, committing acts of terrorism and extremism. Point number 17.
Following orders.
Good soldiers follow orders.
Point number 18. Seeing this side of Cyril Jesus Christ, being lied to and manipulated by the person he loves and acting in such a domestic abuse fashion towards her, even choking her, which is a very common form of abuse used against women by their male partners. And then, even after Cyril assaults her, Dedra still tries to make things work between them, showing how not only had Cyril become somewhat dependent on Dedra, Dedra had also become somewhat dependent on Cyril. Just a match made in hell between these two terrible people. Point number 19. I love that Lazine is using a double-barrel shotgun looking blaster like he's a French farmer who's just using what he has to try and fend off invading Nazis. Point number 20. While KX droids were an absolute pain in the dick to deal with in Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, this episode really shows how terrifying they are when you don't have a lightsaber or the Force to help you deal with them. Unless of course you're Jyn Erso in Rogue One who somehow took one out with a single blaster shot. Point number 21. Pretty miraculous Cyril hasn't been shot at all whilst he's just been standing still. I mean, even if Dedra sent out a message telling everyone he's out in the crowd, they all don't know what he looks like and he's wearing Gorman clothes, so they can't tell him apart from the rest by what he's wearing. Point number 22. Did Thela really just choose to die here for no real reason? He could have thrown the grenade and ran. Why stick around to see the explosion up close? Point number 23.
You took everything from me.
I don't even know who you are.
Did Cyril really expect Cassian to recognise him from Season 1, Episode 3 after all these years? Or, in this moment, did Cyril realise just how pointless his personal vendetta against Cassian was after everything that's just happened? Point number 24. Good thing Vel didn't decide to kill Sam for accidentally killing Cinta, or Cassian would have ended up dead at the hands of the KX droid that never would have become K2SO. Point number 25. How anyone managed to make it out of the plaza alive, I'll never know. And poor Caro. All he wanted was just to expose what the Empire was really doing on Gorman. He never wanted a full-on rebellion, and he certainly never wanted it all to escalate to this level. Point number 26. Damn, Dedra not being able to breathe and trying to undo her collar but being unable to. It's just like what Vel said to Sam after he accidentally killed Cinta.
This is on you now. This is like skin.
And I really thought as well that she was reacting like this because she was standing over Cyril's body or something. But she isn't, so is she reacting like this because she does know Cyril's dead? Or is she reacting like this primarily because of her involvement in the massacre that just occurred? Point number 27. Ending the episode with Edie crying, a mother crying over losing her son, and the conflicting emotions she must be feeling. Devastation that she's lost her son, but also most likely pride that he died in service to the Empire. Like she's the parent of a Japanese kamikaze pilot. Point number 28. Here's a question as well. Do you feel sorry at all for Cyril? Because Tony Gilroy revealed he does in this Decider article. I feel terribly sorry for Cyril. I actually have great affection for Cyril. I think Cyril is a victim in every way. I think he's a romantic and a fantasist. I think he could have just as equally gone in many different directions if he'd been shown any place that there was some love or some light. He craves order, obviously, because he grew up with a sort of alpha predator chaos machine in a box, Gilroy said. So I think his need for order and structure is fundamental. I think he was happy in Gorman, Gilroy said. I mean, Gorman, the clothes, the structure of it, the properness of it. I think Kyle Soller really started to look comfortable in Gorman. I think the fundamental lies that he's been told from the very beginning, I mean, they're crushing. No one has played him properly, so I feel terrible for him. And then to stand there and realise that you've destroyed something that you didn't intend to destroy. My god, there's the thing, Cassian, you've been chasing all this time and it doesn't even know who you are, Gilroy said. I mean, the episode is titled Who Are You for a reason. It's his episode, so I feel I have great empathy for Cyril. So I ask again, do you feel sorry for Cyril? Did you not, but hearing what Gilroy said, changed your mind? Or do you still not feel sorry for Cyril even after hearing what Gilroy had to say? Let me know down in the comments. That was episode 8, now on to episode 9. Point number 29. Cassian pulls out here a very Yak Commando looking knife. A knife I know a lot of people believe is actually banned by the Geneva Convention. However, everything I found on this topic says that it being banned is just an urban myth. So Cassian can go around giving people very, very nasty wounds with the knowledge he isn't breaking any humanitarian laws. And Luthen could have given Saw a very, very nasty wound as well, because he had it on him when he was searched in season 1 episode 11 before he met with Saw. Point number 30. Ooh, nice, we get to see Clea with her hair down again. Love this look for her. Point number 31. Andor, the show, has had a lot more real-world profanity in it compared to other Star Wars media. And what Bale says to Mon Mothma here,
tear the shit out of this place,
is just a perfect example of how the writers expertly incorporate it into the show, including it at the best opportunities to give more weight to important moments and lines of dialogue. Point number 32. It's interesting seeing so many pro-Empire senators being aliens rather than humans, considering how pro-human and anti-alien the Empire actually is. Either these alien senators are just completely oblivious to the reality of living under the Empire as an alien, or they know full well but suck up to the Empire in the hopes they won't be treated as badly as other non-humans. Point number 33. So we've had Harry Strickland from Game of Thrones, Grant Mr. Orwell from House of the Dragon, and now we're back to Game of Thrones with Nicholas Blaine as Senator Carlu here, who played the Spice King of Quarth in season 2. Point number 34. Beskhar's one of Lonnie Jung's agents? That explains how Luthen knows Bale's team has been compromised. Also, fun fact, Beskar is played by Anna Ularu, wife of Mark Rissman, who played Pluty. Point number 35.
The distance between what is said, shut it down, and what is known to be true has become an abyss.
Oh, how perfectly this connects to current day politics and social media. All you have to do is look at Donald Trump's Twitter feed or browse the right-wing side of YouTube to see just how many morons vomit out the most idiotic bullshit with the most misplaced confidence. And the amount of people who fall for it is just pathetic. They are all dragging down the human race. Point number 36. Fans of Rebels might hear Mon Mothma's speech here and be thinking to themselves, that doesn't match up with what she says at the start of Rebels Season 3 Episode 18 on the HoloNet news broadcast. Well, Tony Gilroy actually addresses this in this Entertainment Weekly article. We are hijacking canon, Tony Gilroy admits. In canon, she's rescued by the Gold Squadron, and the speech that they gave in the cartoon, which was a canonical show, is on that ship. And Danny's like, do I have to stick to this effing speech? In a really sneaky way, we're minimizing what they did in Star Wars Rebels, but we're keeping it consistent, Gilroy notes. We're just saying you don't really know the whole story of what happened. Now, don't get confused. I know it sounds like Tony Gilroy is referring to Mon Mothma's speech at the end of the Rebels episode. Her declaration of the Rebel Alliance speech that she gives on the Ghost. But bear in mind, the is on that ship part of his quote he never actually said. When you see a part of a quote in square brackets, that means it was added in by the person using that quote, usually to help clarify something, but I think in this case it just made things more confusing. So if you ignore that part of the quote, it actually makes more sense since it doesn't sound like he's implying Mon Mothma made her speech calling out Palpatine after being rescued. His quote is just pointing out what they changed that was already established in Rebels to make it work for Andor. They changed what she said in her speech and they worked around her being rescued by Gold Squadron by having Cassian rescue her, but the official story being changed changed to Gold Squadron rescuing her instead. So hopefully that clears things up for everyone. Mon Mothma never gave 3 speeches, she only ever gave 2. She didn't give her first speech on a ship, just a declaration of the Rebel Alliance speech which she gave on the Ghost. The writers of Andor just changed what she said in her first speech to make it more impactful for this more adult show, compared to what she said in the HoloNet News broadcast in the Rebels episode, which is a show meant for kids. Point number 37. From the same Entertainment Weekly article I used in my last point, it turns out the original plan wasn't to show or even write the entirety of Mon Mothma's speech, but Genevieve O'Reilly, who plays Mon Mothma, convinced Tony Gilroy and director Janusz Metz otherwise. Tony came into my trailer and I said, "It's just extraordinary," she recounts, and he just sat there and went, "You want me to write the whole speech, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, please, I would love that. Write the whole speech." Within a day or two, he came with that whole speech, she continues. He gave it to me, the idea being that I would learn it and then they would just do those moments. Then I went to the director, and the director was like, "Yeah, let's film the whole speech." It was such a huge thing to me to give that whole speech, it feels really special. Point number 38. Once again from the same Entertainment Weekly article I used in my last 2 points, costume designer Michael Wilkinson talks about the moments where Mon Mothma drops her robe and puts on Cassian's jacket. We knew that Cassian had to give her his coat because he has to disguise her to leave the building, she explains. It wasn't scripted where it happened, but I remember us really workshopping that. Where does it mean the most? Do you do it when the pod retracts before you leave? She continues. Because once she leaves that Senate pod, she's got a target on her back, but could she be more effective at getting through the building to escape with that on? Because there is respect given to that robe. Then there's that really violent moment in that lobby and she's faced with that wall of undeniable aggression and rebellion. It's deeply shocking to her. That is the most instinctive, vulnerable moment to drop everything in order to escape that. She has been working for the rebellion deeply and intrinsically, and she's been vital to the rebellion, she reflects. But that is the moment that she crosses that Rubicon, and she crosses it with Cassian. That felt beautiful, that it is with him, given where we go in Rogue One. But it's that there's no turning back at that point, there is no going back. Point number 39. Cassian telling Mon Mothma welcome to the rebellion when she says she's not sure if she can do this. I don't think it's so much Cassian telling her, getting blood on your hands is all a part of rebellion, Senator, get used to it. But more so him saying, not being sure but still pushing forward no matter the cost is what rebelling is all about. It's just Cassian essentially saying rebellions are built on hope. You just gotta keep going in the face of uncertainty. Point number 40. With how Cloris was listening to Mon Mothma's speech and had a look on his face suggesting he was being convinced by what she was saying, if that was the case, it's a shame he'd caused Mon Mothma to distrust him and then bumped into Cassian, who was taking 0 chances. Point number 41. I love how after Cassian shoots Cloris and you see people rushing away, there's this one guy with a walking stick who just sits down on the steps. It even looks like he's trying to play dead by leaning against the wall and letting his arms fall limp. Point number 42. Nice touch having the sound of Legret flipping the switch transition into Cassian flooring the hovercar he and Mon Mothma are in. Point number 43. When Vel's inspecting the blasters here, we can see 2 that look very similar. Or maybe they're the exact same blasters that Jyn and Cassian use throughout Rogue One. Also, the last blaster Vel looks at, asks whose it is, and Melshi, you know, the guy Cassian escaped Narkina 5 with back in Season 1 and who also appeared in Rogue One, puts his hand up and says it's his blaster. The reason Vel recognizes it and asks whose it is because it used to belong to Cassian and Cyril before him. Cassian took it off Cyril in Season 1 Episode 3, he used it whilst with Vel's group on Aldhani, and he gave it to Melshi in Season 1 Episode 11 after retrieving it from his hotel room. That's why Vel recognises it. She remembered it being one of Cassian's blasters that he had on Aldhani. Point number 44. So yeah, this conversation between Erskine, Clea and Cassian ties into Tony Gilroy trying to work around what's already been established in Rebels. There's a ship waiting for her, which I believe is referring to the Chandrila Mistress, not the Ghost. The speech that they want her to make is her declaration of the Rebel Alliance speech that we see her make at the end of Rebels Season 3 Episode 18. And the Yavin escort is of course Gold Squadron that we see her travelling with in that episode of Rebels. Notice though how Clea says they want to rewrite the story. Very similar to what Bail said to Mon Mothma at the start of this episode about the Empire lying about what happened on Gorman. The Empire wants to rewrite history so they seem more heroic on Gorman, while the Rebellion wants to rewrite history so they seem more heroic via Gold Squadron.
We are not going to lock this in, any of this. That's the plan. Gold Squadron will deliver the Senator to Yavin.
Point number 45. Am I insane, or does Cassian standing here in this circular doorway resemble the Rebel Alliance Starbird? Which would actually make perfect sense with what Bix tells Cassian in her message and with what we see him do in Rogue One. Cassian is a symbol of the rebellion and it needs him for them to win. And with Bix saying she believes that's his purpose, how she's mentioned she sensed something happen between the Force Healer and Cassian, and that she's had dreams about Cassian being some sort of messenger, it's got a lot of people speculating whether it's not just Cassian that's being guided by the Force, which Luthen unknowingly suggests when he points out Cassian might not have actually been making his own decisions, but Bix as well, and it's influencing her decisions so as to make sure Cassian ends up going to Scarif and not abandoning the rebellion. Point number 46.
And when it's done, when it's over, and we've won, we can do all the things we ever wanted.
Yeah, I think Rogue One might have something to say about that, Bix. This led people to believe that the last we'll see of Bix in the final 3 episodes is of her and B2 on Ferrix sometime after the events of Rogue One with a brick for Cassian. Point number 47. If you felt the introduction of K2SO into the show was a bit sudden, that's because originally K2SO's origin story was meant to get its own entire episode. As per this Entertainment Weekly article, Dan Gilroy wrote an amazing, entirely self-contained episode that was episode 209. Tony Gilroy reveals, referring to his brother and Andor writer. It was an amazing episode that was like a horror movie. They had to bring this huge ugly tanker ship to Yavin and there was a KX unit that was trapped inside there hunting. It was sort of like a monster movie with K2 on it. It was really cool. We could not afford to do it, sighs Gilroy. It was made clear that it was out of the range, so we had to abandon that and consolidate things. The whole dynamic and the economics of everything changed between Season 1 and Season 2, Gilroy notes. Season 1 was, oh my god, Pearl Harbor was just bombed, build aircraft carriers as fast as possible. We don't care. Size, scale, build it, go Game of Thrones, money is no object, make it. By the time we got to Season 2 and Bob Iger came back, everything had changed and everybody was belt tightening. It's hard to ask for more money when they're laying people off at Disney. And we were like, wow man, well we built half an aircraft carrier, we'd like to finish it. We made as many concessions as we could, but it was still a huge gamble on their part to keep going and still a huge ask. So thank you Disney and thank you Lucasfilm. It was a lot of tough conversations and a lot of anxiety, but really in the end they really backed our play. I can't believe we almost got an Alien-esque horror movie origin story for K2SO. That would have been so cool to see. Point number 48. Speaking of K2SO's origin story, there already was one before this show and it was completely different. In the one-shot comic book Rogue One Cassian and K2SO Special 1, Cassian and twins Kurtas and Rizmor, whilst on a mission to the planet Wekako to uncover Imperial security protocols, end up getting into a confrontation with, but eventually reprogramming K2SO so that he stops wanting to detain / murder them. But now this origin story no longer applies due to episodes 8 and 9 of Andor retconning it completely. Point number 49. The first word K2SO ever says to Cassian.
Hello.
And the last word K2SO ever says to Cassian.
Goodbye.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
To round all this off, my least favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to the seeming death of Thela. There was really no point for him to not run away after throwing the grenade. And my most favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to finally seeing Cyril and Cassian confront each other. And with Cyril realising the man he's been hunting doesn't even recognise him, along with finding out he's just been used by the Empire and the person he loves, but being unable to do anything with this information and complete shift in his life on account of being shot dead. Point number 1. Lonnie really shouldn't have made it incredibly apparent that he was no longer useful to Luthen. Telling Luthen he was burned was a big mistake, and then telling Luthen everything with only a promise of being taken to a safe place was an even bigger mistake. Point number 2. So Lonnie tells Luthen, who tells Clea, who tells Cassian, who tells the Rebel Council, 1. The Empire just wanted to control Gorman to strip mine it for
deep substrate foliated calcite.
2. The Empire's not looking for rebels on Jeddah, they just want the planet's kyber crystals. 3. Super weapon connected to Scarif that Krennic's been building for a decade. 4. An engineer called Galen Erso is involved. I've seen people say, what was the point in this at all? Since at the beginning of Rogue One, Tivik tells Cassian most of that information anyway. Well, jumping forward a little, by which I actually mean a lot, all the way to episode 12, 12, we see the majority of the Rebel Council don't believe what Lonnie told Luthen was good information. It's only because Tivik is Cassian's informant in Saw's Rebel cell that they know Saw and his cell are on Jeddah. That Lonnie told Luthen about Jeddah Kyber crystals, and that Tivik is being very persistent in wanting to talk to Cassian. That Mon Mothma and Dreven convinced Bail to send Cassian to Kafrene to find out what Tivik knows. And it's with that conversation between Cassian and Tivik that confirms 100% what Lonnie told Luthen was completely true. He tells Cassian that a guy called Galen Erso convinced a cargo pilot to defect and warn the rebels that the Empire is building a planet-destroying weapon, and that the Kyber crystals being mined on Jeddah are a part of this planet killer. So we already know most of the Rebel Council didn't believe what Lonnie told Luthen. If Lonnie never found out about the Death Star, or he never told Luthen, or after telling Luthen, the information just never made it back to Yavin, and the first and only time the Rebel Council ever heard about the superweapon was from one of Cassian's contacts, then they still would not have believed that the Empire was actually building a superweapon. It is only because they hear the same information from two completely separate sources that the Alliance finally starts taking it all seriously, and sends a squad out to go rescue Jyn Erso so she can help with getting to Saw and the deserter pilot who was sent by her father, Galen. I hope that adequately explains why getting Lonnie's information all the way to Yavin wasn't pointless. It actually helps to explain why the rebels so easily believed Tivik and what he told Cassian in Rogue One. Now, back to episode 10 with point number 3. If it wasn't obvious, the reason Luthen is insistent on dealing with the comms is because Lonnie told him Dedra is very likely coming for him, and logically, one of the places she'd go to find him would be his shop, which, as we find out, is exactly what she does. And that reveal that it's Dedra standing outside his shop, that oh shit moment, like when Cyril spotted Cassian in episode 8 and these two characters were finally going to confront each other, just had me on the edge of my seat. I loved it. Point number 4.
At the moment, only 2 pieces of questionable provenance in the gallery. Any guesses?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and guess you and Dedra. Point number 5. I hope you don't mind if I go on a slight tangent here and talk about a few of the items in Luthen's shop. 1, you got the helmet that looks like Galen Marrick's Sith Stalker helmet from the Force Unleashed games. Of course, Galen Marrick is part of Legends, not canon, so who knows who this Sith armor used to actually belong to. 2, there's stone fragments that have the Mortis God hand symbols on them from Rebels Season 4 episodes 11 and 12. 3, there's what looks like a Sith holocron and a cube next to it with the same design that people believe is a Jedi holocron. 4, there's a Jedi Temple guard mask like those we see in the Clone Wars Season 5 Episode 20. I mentioned these items specifically because I now want to talk about this clip from a stream from Shadowversity's Night's Watch channel.
I'm sorry, these are the questions that I now start to ask. As a Star Wars fan and in the Star Wars universe, there is so much more wrong.
Oh, there is.
Luthen's store. Sorry, I've been Luthen's store is full of Force-sensitive material on Coruscant. Do you really think that Vader and Palpatine can't sense the shit out of that fucking store? There's 2 holocrons. There's a Sith holocron and a Jedi holocron. There's a Jedi Temple Guard's helmet. There's Starkiller's armor. There's the tablets that Palpatine wants to get into the world between worlds that the wolves show to Ezra in Rebels and then make them disappear. Somehow they just appear in Luthen's store, but the jangling keys aren't there, are they? They're not in this show, are they? Get the fuck out of here. I'm sorry, none of that makes any fucking sense other than, look, Star Wars reference. Hang on, I'm just being corrected in the chat here saying that's not jangling keys, that's Easter eggs. Bullshit. A Jedi and a Sith holocron? A Jedi and a Sith holocron?
I don't even know.
Not only that, let me just go back to the tablets that he's got. It's the fist, the hand, and the other hand or something. And it's from the Mortis Arc stuff, right? And it's from Rebels, and it's the access into the world between worlds. These tablets get revealed to Ezra by the wolves, and they are literally like teleported in front of him, and then the wolves make them disappear. It's like the wolves are the guardians of these tablets or some shit, right? They're not actually physically there. The only way that Sabine gets them is she scanned an image of them, right? And that's how they get into the world between worlds. So what? Did Luthen just go to those wolves and go, hey, wolves, show me those tablets, and then just shank them, kill those wolves, and takes the tablets to put in his store? That's jangling keys as far as I'm concerned, especially with when those episodes came out originally in season 1. And they were in there, and everybody's like, oh, look, it's a Temple Guard helmet. Oh, my God, there's the access to the World Between Worlds tablets. Like, nobody asks how or why. And how does that make sense in the Star Wars galaxy?
Just to be clear, I don't like Shadiversity at all. He's a member of the fandom clan, and his Night's Watch content is absolute garbage. And whoever was talking in this clip, I've no idea what they're called since they don't show names. What they had to say about the stuff in Luthen's shop was also complete garbage.
There's 2 holocrons. There's a Sith holocron and a Jedi holocron.
In regards to the supposed holocrons, the design of the pyramid object is just an Easter egg to the Sith holocron prop created by Industrial Light and Magic. For Star Wars Attack of the Clones, the visual dictionary back in 2002, and the image of which has been used for the Sith holocron in reference books all the way up to 2024, with Star Wars Encyclopedia, the comprehensive guide to the Star Wars galaxy. But holocrons, as we've seen throughout the majority of Star Wars media, like Rebels and Jedi Fallen Order, are small enough to hold in one hand. There's only ever been one giant holocron ever been mentioned in canon, and that's the giant Sith holocron Sidious found on Moraband that's only ever been mentioned in the 2016 reference book Star Wars Complete Locations, which also shares a similar appearance to the ILM Sith holocron prop, again most likely as just an Easter egg reference. Finally, the most obvious evidence that this pyramid can actually be a Sith holocron is that if it was one, it wouldn't be in Luthen's possession, but Sidious's. It most likely is just a visual Easter egg, or maybe in universe it could just be something that was designed to look like a Sith holocron, but it itself isn't one. I mean, I could whittle a gun out of soap, but that doesn't make it an actual gun, you know? Though I lean more into it just being a visual Easter egg, since the cube next to it shares the same design. But square holocrons are used by Jedi, so why would a Jedi holocron and a Sith holocron share the same design? Plus, the design of the cube has never been used for a Jedi holocron in any Star Wars media.
There's a Jedi Temple Guard's helmet.
Why would Sidious or Vader care at all about a random Jedi Temple Guard mask?
There's Starkiller's armor.
Galen Marek isn't canon, so again, why would Vader or Sidious care at all about some random Sith armor? And with what this guy says about the Mortis and World Between Worlds stuff, I'll just pass the mic to my man, Luke Skywalker.
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
There's the tablets that Palpatine wants to get into the World Between Worlds, and it's the access into the World Between Worlds.
The keystone is not the access to the World Between Worlds. That's the painting that we see in Rebels Season 4, Episode 12.
It teleported in front of him, and then the wolves make them disappear.
Yes, the wolves make the keystone appear before Ezra, but the wolves at no point make the keystone disappear.
It's like the wolves are the guardians of these tablets or some shit, right?
The wolves are not the guardians of the keystone. They literally tell Ezra it is from the Jedi Temple on Lothal.
This stone, where's it from?
Jedi Temple.
So, while the keystone does appear out of nowhere in the dream vision that Ezra has, in the real world, the wolves most likely just stole it from the Empire, who were at the Jedi Temple, who were collecting everything they could find from the temple.
They're not actually physically there. The only way that Sabine gets them is she scanned an image of them.
The keystone is in fact a physical object. Ezra carries it back to base and Sabine touches and moves it. The reason they took a scan of it is because it's easier to carry a scan than a big slab of stone.
So what, did Luthen just go to those wolves and go, hey wolves, show me those tablets, and then just shank them, kill those wolves, and takes the tablets to put in his store?
Obviously, the stone fragments Luthen has in his shop came from a different location that is also related to the Mortis gods. It really grinds my gears when people claim they are knowledgeable about something but then proceed to talk out of their ass and spread misinformation. Shadiversity and everyone else in the fandom clan are notorious for doing this, and I recommend watching the Birdman's Exposing the Grift videos where he calls out other fandom clan members like Critical Drinker and Nerdrotic, who also never know anything they attempt to talk about and just lie to their audience by spreading absolute bullshit. Point number 6. Chekhov's Starpath unit pays off from all the way back at the start of Season 1. You really should have figured out a way to go back and get it with Cassie and Luthen. In hindsight, that would have been the smart thing to do. Point number 7. People questioning why didn't Luthen just rig the shop to blow? 2 reasons I can think of is that there's no guarantee that everything that needs to be destroyed would be destroyed in the blast, and that Luthen actually really did care for the antiques and such he had in his shop and wouldn't want any harm to come to them. Also, side note, I've seen people say Luthen sacrificing himself was pointless due to Tivik telling Cassian the same information in Rogue One. First, I'll just refer you back to point number 2 of this video, and second, Luthen actually sacrificed himself so that the ISB couldn't interrogate and get information out of him. So no, Luthen's sacrifice wasn't pointless at all. Point number 8. In these flashbacks, we learn Luthen used to be a sergeant in the Imperial Army and his name was Leia, which of course is what you get if you reverse Rail. And we also learn Clea was an inhabitant of a world that the Empire massacred and was rescued by Luthen. Similar to how Cassian was found and taken by Marva, Clem and B2 EMO from his homeworld of Canary that had been ravaged by the Republic due to mining. Also, the flashbacks and similar backstory between Cassian and Clea led a lot of people to wonder if Clea was actually Cassian's sister. But yeah, nope, she isn't. I doubt we'll ever find out what happened to Cassian's sister. Point number 9. If you convert the Aurebesh on the hospital building to English, it translates to Lena So. Lena So is the name of a human woman who became the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic in 234 BBY in the High Republic era. She was the one who came up with the project of the Great Works, which many speculated the planet of At-Atin might have been connected to during the release of the Skeleton Crew TV show. Point number 10. This alien granny, who's actually called Pfizer, is one of the highlights of this episode. I love the scene where she makes a noise and Clea's just like,
"What?"
And then when we see her after Clea's dropped her off and she's just singing to herself, or scatting as the Disney Plus subtitles say, perfect injection of comedy into such a tense and dramatic episode. Love it. Point number 11. According to screenwriter Tom Bissell in this YouTube video on the Backstory Magazine channel, the planet on which Luthen and Clea blow up a bridge is actually Naboo and was chosen because Naboo is Palpatine's home planet. Which is something I think a lot of people actually forget, that Palpatine came from Naboo just like Padme. Point number 12. I love Clea's double-barreled revolver-looking blaster. I want one. That was episode 10, now on to episode 11. Point number 13.
Say it. Say the word.
Death Star.
That's 2 words. Point number 14. Dedra saying she was accidentally sent intel when in reality she probably actually went scavenging for it is funny when you compare it to the Pete Hegseth signal chat leaks, even though the show couldn't have been referencing that due to it being written and filmed before that scandal happened. Point number 15. In the Andor Season 2 declassified video for episodes 10 to 12 on the Star Wars YouTube channel, it is revealed that Krennic putting his finger on Dedra's head was improvisation by Ben Mendelsohn.
And then he did this weird thing with his finger on the top of my head. I thought, brilliant.
That, combined with him getting all up in her space and grabbing her head, also combined with Cyril choking her in episode 8, and also combined with Kroll attempting to grape Bix in episode 3, all adds up together to demonstrate how men use invading personal space and physical violence to demean, intimidate, and abuse women. Point number 16. Yeah, Dedra being in possession of intel she shouldn't have, combined with Lonnie having essentially her login details, also combined with her having never found access despite hunting him for years, and also combined with her confronting Luthen on her own, all adds up to make her look very suspicious. For all that ISB knows, Dedra could have gone into Luthen's shop alone to give him the chance to die by chop suey, and avoid being captured and interrogated where he might have given up information about the rebellion. Point number 17. Rev Nog is a new addition to Star Wars lore, actually making its first ever appearance in this show all the way back in Season 1, Episode 1, and then it's only ever been mentioned outside of this show in 2 comics and an audio drama, plus its published script. Point number 18. Partagaz telling Hurt the warrant for Clea's arrest should be because she has a disease that could spread reminds me of this conversation between Admiral Daystar and Lieutenant Moy back in Episode 1 of this season.
Why not have a plague or stage some natural disaster? That'd motivate them to leave the place of their own accord.
We've actually gamed that out. It gets unpredictable very quickly.
And as we see at the start of episode 12, things do in fact get very unpredictable for Partagaz, since when reinforcements are needed for Hurt, no one's available due to them all focusing on the disease warrants. And it all plays into how Partagaz describes the ISB as being healthcare providers back in Season 1, Episode 4, and of the rebellion being like a disease. Just like how he also says in episode 12,
just keep spreading, doesn't it?
after listening to Nemik's manifesto. Point number 19. I love how this ISB technician, whose name is Lepori, geeks out over Luthen and Claire's setup, and a slight headshake from Joy Daly. All I can hear is Partagaz.
Calibrate your enthusiasm.
Point number 20. Lepori explaining how the radio has been using Imperial broadcast power by splicing into a metro tower next door reminds me of what Luthen said to Lonnie back in Season 1, Episode 10.
I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them.
Obviously, when he said this to Lonnie, he was referring to the more extreme things he's had to do, but nevertheless, using Imperial broadcast power against them still reminded me of that line. Point number 21. Wait, if K2SO remembers being in a parade on Coruscant, does that mean he also remembers being in the massacre on Gorman? Does he remember staring at Cyril and all the Gormans he attacked, like Enza, who he killed? That's kinda messed up, but then again, wiping the memories of droids and reprogramming them to change their allegiance has always been kinda messed up. Point number 22. So, Claire never intended to leave Coruscant. At the hospital, she only ever hid her face from the cameras to get in, but after taking Luthen off of life support, she started to not care if the cameras saw her face. And that's why she's telling Cassian everything to take back to the rebellion, instead of just leaving with him to tell them herself. This begs the question though, if Cassian did leave Claire on Coruscant, what would Claire do next? Join Luthen in the afterlife Chop Suey style? Go into hiding on Coruscant Ahsoka style?
A third ridiculous guess?
That was episode 11, now on to the final episode of Andor. Point number 23. K2SO's hallway scene will make a fine addition to the collection. Absolutely brutal that he uses Hurt as a human shield, even though it seems he doesn't need to, being seemingly blaster-proof and all. Question for all of you as well. Who had the best hallway scene? Vader in Rogue One, Luke in The Mandalorian, Baylan in Ahsoka, Maul in the Clone Wars, or K2SO in Andor? Point number 24. I think I speak for everyone when I say fuck Jabel and Pamlo here. Such smug pricks. They just scream they're only in a position of power within the rebellion only because they're senators. I mean, so are Bail and Mon Mothma, but unlike them, Jabel and Pamlo seem to think they're superior to everyone and they demand respect that they haven't earned. And then, as we see in Rogue One, when Jyn told the Alliance Council the Death Star was real and they should steal the plans for it from Scarif, Jabel and Pamlo were both instead like, that's it, pack it in lads, it's over, there's no stopping the Empire now. Showing how they never had what it takes to be a proper rebel. Point number 25. Radis mentions a Dodonna and a Merrick. Dodonna referring to General Jan Dodonna and Merrick referring to General Antok Merrick. Point number 26. I like how when Cassian and Vel are toasting the dead they leave out Skeen. Fuck that guy. Point number 27. I was confused about what Vel and Cassian were referring to when they said,
I've heard people claim they were there when it happened.
I thought since they toasted to the Danis and Aldani that maybe the Empire had massacred Aldani like they did Gorman. But when I asked the Andor subreddit what they thought Cassian and Vel were referring to, the most common answer I got was that they were talking about people who were claiming they were part of the Aldani heist from Season 1 when they weren't. And the reason people would want to claim they were part of the heist is because the money that was stolen played a big part in funding the rebellion. Point number 28. I like how Vel just straight out says to Cassian,
Mon wants to know if your Luthen story is real.
Rather than try to act like she doesn't know anything and is just curious about what happened on Coruscant and what he told the council. She was done being a spy just like Cassian was done being a rebel, but a loved one convinced them otherwise. And this is her way of doing what Mon Mothma asked her to do but still sticking to her decision to give up spying. Point number 29. Partagaz dying by chop suey rather than take the fall for information about the Death Star getting out reminds me of this scene from Enemy at the Gates.
I have to report to the boss. Perhaps you'd prefer to avoid the red tape.
Point number 30.
If I die fighting the Empire, I want to go down swinging.
I think the Death Star will have something to say about that, Bail. Point number 31. Neat to see Cassian looks after his plants just like Marva used to. I would say I hope someone looked after his plants after his death, but considering the rebels end up abandoning Yavin anyway, the plants would have ended up abandoned as well. Everyone please pick up your watering cans and pour one out. Point number 32. So Perrin must have convinced the Empire he wasn't involved in everything Mon Mothma was up to, and now appears to be involved with Davos Skulden's wife Runai, which is pretty scandalous. I like as well how at first it seems like he's going to lift his arm to put it around Runai, but instead he just reaches for the booze. Point number 33. While Partagaz didn't take the fall, it seems Dedra certainly did, as we see her either in the same prison on Narkina 5 that Cassian was in back in Season 1, or one that looks very similar. I wonder if, just like Cassian, Dedra worked on making pieces of the Death Star, maybe even pieces of the second Death Star after the destruction of the first. Point number 34. I wonder as well if this Force healer had any interactions with Luke Skywalker when he showed up on Yavin. Maybe telling him what she senses in him just like she did with Cassian. Point number 35. And it appears the theories were true that Bix was pregnant with Cassian's child when she left him so he wouldn't leave the rebellion. The Force really likes to take away either one or both of a kid's parents. Anakin lost his mum, Luke and Leia lost their mum, and Leia actually lost both her step-parents as well. Jason lost his dad, Ezra lost both his parents, Sabine lost both her parents, Maul lost his mum. The list goes on. Point number 36. During the airing of this show, a lot of people assumed that the new characters introduced that we never saw in Rogue One and beyond would end up dying by the end. But that's ended up not being the case. Vel's still alive, Wilman's still alive, Bix is still alive, Clea's still alive, Dedra's still alive. Makes you wonder what future Star Wars media might do with these characters, and maybe reveal where they were and what they were doing during the events of Rogue One, the original trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. To round all this off, my least favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to not getting to see much of K2SO. What we do get of him in the last 2 episodes is great, but I would have liked to have seen more. And my most favourite part from all 3 episodes goes to Clea making her way through the hospital, especially when Pfizer gets involved. Thank you everyone for watching Triple S Reviews. If you enjoyed the video, and I hope you did, give it a like to let me know. And if you want to see more, then make sure to subscribe and check your subscriptions tab, not the home tab, for new videos. I also have a variety channel where I post a variety of different videos. If any of them interest you, check them out. I've been Triple S, you've all been amazing, and I shall see you all in the next video.